Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. During the third weekend of 2025 that ended on January 19th, two new movies made it into the weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office. And their cumulative total earnings for the weekend fell by 9.54% to $48.9 million, as compared with last weekend's adjusted cumulative total of $54 million, which makes it not only the third consecutive weekend that the top 5's cumulative domestic box office total was below $100 million, it was also below $50 million for the first time in 10 weeks. So not a stellar weekend for domestic movie theaters. But before proceeding, if you're enjoying this video, please consider pressing the like button, and if you'd like to see more of my content, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel. And I want to convey my deepest thanks and appreciation to everyone who has subscribed. This weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office included the following. Opening at number 1 was Sony Pictures, Columbia Pictures, Big Boss Entertainment's Color Creative Television and 4 other studios' low-budget comedy entitled One of Them Days. Clinging to number 2 was Walt Disney Pictures' animated prequel entitled Mufasa the Lion King. Opening at number 3 was Blumhouse's and Motel Movies' horror movie entitled Wolfman. Falling to number 4 was Paramount Pictures, Sega Sammy Group's original films, Marsa Animation Planets, and Blur Studios' animated threequel entitled Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And falling to number 5 was Diamond Film Productions, G-Bases, and G-Unit Films' moderately low-budget action film entitled Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. One of Them Days opened by earning $11.6 million domestically, but it earned no money internationally. Mufasa the Lion King earned another $11.5 million domestically, $31.3 million internationally, and $47.3 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $205.8 million, $382.2 million, and $588 million respectively. Wolfman opened by earning $10.6 million domestically and $4.8 million internationally for a global gross opening weekend box office total of $15.4 million. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 earned another $8.6 million domestically, $23.2 million internationally, and $34.8 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $216.5 million, $203.5 million, and $420 million respectively. Den of Thieves 2, Pantera earned another $6.6 million domestically, less than $100,000 internationally, and $10.7 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $26.2 million, $5 million, and $31.2 million respectively. I'd love to know in the comments below whether you watched any of these 5 movies this weekend and what you thought about them if you did, or whether you weren't interested in seeing any of them. So even though this is 2025, we're continuing to deal with the 3 highest grossing movies domestically for 2024. And those 3 movies remained Disney Pixar's animated movie Inside Out 2, Disney and Marvel Studios' MCU movie Deadpool and Wolverine, and Universal's Wicked, with domestic box office earnings of $653 million, $636.7 million, and $464.5 million, respectively. So Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine remain the only 2 movies so far for 2024 that have broken $600 million domestically, and Deadpool and Wolverine became the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time domestically. And globally, the 3 highest grossing movies for 2024 remained Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, and Moana 2, with earnings of $1,698.6 million, $1,338.1 million, and $1,009.9 million, respectively. Thus, Moana 2 is only the 3rd movie so far for 2024 to break $1 billion worldwide, after Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine. Inside Out 2 outperformed last year's highest-grossing movie Barbie by $253 million, and Deadpool and Wolverine became both the highest-grossing R-rated movie worldwide of all time and the MCU's 6th highest-grossing movie worldwide of all time. The reported production budgets for Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, and Moana 2 are $200 million, $250 million, and $150 million respectively. And to estimate what their break-even point ranges might be, I'll multiply each movie's production budget by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget. And when I do that, we get the following estimated break-even point ranges. For Inside Out 2, we get an estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million. For Deadpool and Wolverine, it's from $625 million to $750 million. And for Moana 2, it's from $375 million to $450 million. Thus, all three of these movies have made bank. That brings us to several other movies that I am continuing to track but are no longer in or never were in the top 5, and they include the following. Falling out of the top 5 for the first time since it premiered to number 6 was Walt Disney Animation Studios' sequel entitled Moana 2 during its 8th weekend at the box office. Falling to number 9 was Universal Pictures and Marc Platt Productions' musical fantasy entitled Wicked, starring Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Jeff Goldblum, and Michelle Yeoh. Falling to number 14 was Paramount Pictures' Scott Free Films, Lucy Fisher's, and Douglas Wick's historical drama Gladiator 2, starring Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, and Pedro Pascal. Rising to number 18 was Universal Pictures and DreamWorks Animation's movie entitled The Wild Robot. And falling to number 26 was Columbia Pictures, Sony Pictures, Marvel Entertainment's, and two other studios' supervillain movie entitled Kraven the Hunter. Moana 2 earned another $6.1 million domestically, $12.2 million internationally, and $20.1 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $442.8 million, $567.1 million, and $1,009.9 million respectively. Wicked earned another $3.6 million domestically, $5.4 million internationally, and $10.9 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $464.5 million, $244.1 million, and $708.6 million respectively. Domestically, Gladiator 2 earned another $500,000 during the weekend and $507,000 during the week, and it earned another $2.2 million internationally and $3.2 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $172 million, $286.6 million, and $458.6 million respectively. The Wild Robot earned another $266,000 domestically, but no new money internationally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $143.5 million, $181.1 million, and $324.6 million respectively. Domestically, Kraven the Hunter earned another $106,000 during the weekend and $157,000 during the week, and it earned another $1.1 million internationally and $1.4 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $24.7 million, $36.1 million, and $60.8 million respectively. Now, to know whether these movies are going to break even or not, as well as how much money they might be losing, we need to estimate their break-even points. When a movie's marketing budget is known, we can add it to the movie's production budget and then multiply the sum by 2. Otherwise, we can multiply the production budget by 2.5 for a single mid-range estimated break-even point, or by both 2.5 and 3.0 for a broader estimated break-even point range. Both methods account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves. For Mufasa: The Lion King, with its production budget of $200 million, as reported by multiple sources, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million. For Sonic the Hedgehog 3, with its production budget of around $122 million, as reported by the New York Times, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $305 million to $366 million. For Wicked, with its reported production budget of $150 million, that yields a break-even point range of $375 million to $450 million. For Gladiator 2, with its reported very high production budget of $250 million, as reported by Variety, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $625 million to $750 million. For The Wild Robot, with its production budget of $78 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $195 million to $234 million. For Kraven the Hunter, with its reported production budget of $110 million, according to Variety, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $275 million to $330 million. So in this video, I am no longer projecting or never have projected what the final domestic or global gross box office earnings might be for the movies Wicked, Gladiator 2, The Wild Robot, or Kraven the Hunter, because their expected future earnings are either currently too small, possibly non-existent, or going unreported, or their projected earnings aren't much higher than their current earnings. Wicked has already made bank. For Gladiator 2, with its reported global gross box office earnings of $458.6 million and its estimated break-even point range of $625 million to $750 million, the movie currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $166.4 million to $291.4 million in global gross box office revenue. But The Wild Robot has already made bank. And for Kraven the Hunter, with its reported global gross box office earnings of $60.8 million and its estimated break-even point range of $275 million to $330 million, the movie currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $214.2 million to $269.2 million in global gross box office revenue. Then, by dividing the losses in global gross box office revenue by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, the affected studios currently stand to lose the following. For Gladiator 2, Paramount Pictures, Scott-Free Films, Lucy Fisher, and Douglas Wick currently stand to lose around $83.2 million to $145.7 million. And for Kraven the Hunter, Columbia Pictures, Sony Pictures, Marvel Entertainment, and 2 other studios currently stand to lose around $107.1 million to $134.6 million. And since Kraven the Hunter isn't going to be earning that much more money during the remainder of its theatrical run, it's currently poised to replace Madam Web as Sony and Columbia Pictures' lowest-grossing Marvel movie of all time, both domestically and worldwide. And that now brings us to the movies whose final domestic and global gross box office revenues I am currently projecting, which includes Mufasa the Lion King, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and Moana 2. For Mufasa the Lion King, using a range of possible average weekly drops from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $229.8 million at the low end, $235.5 million at the mid-range, and $242.9 million at the upper end, which is higher than last week's projection. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 35%, which is lower than last week, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $656.6 million at the low end, $672.8 million at the mid-range, and $693.8 million at the upper end, which is higher than last week's projection. So with the movie's estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million, Mufasa the Lion King marginally broke even as of last weekend, and should fully break even in around 1 to 2 weeks. For Sonic the Hedgehog 3, using a range of possible average weekly drops from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $233.9 million at the low end, $238 million at the mid-range, and $243.4 million at the upper end, which is more narrow than last week's projection. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 51.55%, which is lower than last week, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $453.8 million at the low end, $461.7 million at the mid-range, and $472.1 million at the upper end, which is higher than last week's projection. And with the movie's current global gross box office earnings of $420 million, an estimated break-even point range of $305 million to $366 million, the movie fully broke even and is making bank. For Moana 2, using a range of possible average weekly drops from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $454.6 million at the low end, $457.3 million at the mid-range, and $460.7 million at the upper end, which is higher than last week's projection. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 43.85%, which is similar to last week's, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $1,036.8 million at the low end, $1,042.9 million at the mid-range, and $1,050.8 million at the upper end, which is higher than last week's projection. And yes, Moana 2 has already made bank. So to recap, Kraven the Hunter and Gladiator 2 are definite flops, but Sonic the Hedgehog 3, The Wild Robot, Deadpool and Wolverine, Inside Out 2, Moana 2, and Wicked have all made bank, while Mufasa the Lion King is closer to fully breaking even. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video and whether you have or are planning to see any of the movies that I talked about. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to each and every one of you who has subscribed to support this channel. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, and Blue Sky by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.